The BT series of tanks was one of the most important steps in the development of Soviet armored forces before and during the Second World War. These tanks, whose name comes from the Russian words, Bystrokhodny tank, meaning fast tank, were designed to be highly mobile, fast-moving, and capable of fighting in conditions where speed and maneuverability were just as important as armor and firepower. The series began in the early 1930s and became the foundation for the famous T-34 tank, which would later go on to become one of the most successful and iconic tanks in history. The BT tanks were based on a design purchased from an American engineer named J. Walter Christie, who had created innovative suspension systems for tanks. The Soviet Union saw the potential in Christie's designs and decided to develop them further. The Christie suspension gave the BT tanks their excellent mobility, allowing them to move quickly over rough ground at higher speeds than most tanks of the time. Another special feature of the BT tanks was that they could run both on wheels and on tracks. The crew could remove the tracks and drive on wheels for longer road movements, which reduced wear on the tracks and increased speed on paved roads. The first of the series, the BT-2, was introduced in 1932. It was armed with a 37mm gun and a machine gun, and while lightly armored, it was very fast compared to other tanks of the era, capable of speeds around 50 to 70 km per hour. This speed gave Soviet forces the ability to use these tanks for rapid advances and flanking maneuvers. The BT-2 was followed by the BT-5, which improved the design with a larger turret and a more powerful 45mm gun, giving it more effective firepower against enemy tanks and fortifications. As the years went on, further versions such as the BT-7 appeared. The BT-7 was the last major version of the series before the development of the T-34. It had thicker armor, a more reliable engine, and the same 45mm gun, which by the late 1930s was beginning to lose effectiveness against newer enemy tanks but was still useful against lighter vehicles and infantry positions. The BT-7 also had versions equipped with radios for better command and coordination, which was very important for large-scale armored operations. The BT tanks were widely used during the 1930s in several conflicts where the Soviet Union was involved. They saw combat in the Spanish Civil War, where Soviet crews and advisors supported the Republican forces against the nationalists. The tanks showed their speed and mobility but also revealed weaknesses in armor protection, as they were vulnerable to anti-tank guns and even heavy machine guns at close range. Despite this, they provided valuable experience to Soviet tank crews and commanders. The BT series was also used in battles against Japan in the Far East, most notably at the Battle of Khalkhin Gol in 1939. Under the command of General Georgy Zhukov, Soviet BT tanks played a decisive role in encircling and defeating the Japanese forces. This battle demonstrated the potential of fast, coordinated armored attacks and gave the Red Army valuable lessons that would later be applied during the Second World War. When Germany invaded the Soviet Union in June 1941, thousands of BT tanks were still in service. By that time, however, they were becoming outdated compared to the German Panzer III and Panzer IV, which had better armor and firepower. The thin armor of the BT tanks could not withstand German anti-tank weapons, and their 45mm guns were often too weak to deal with the more heavily armored German vehicles. Despite this, the BT tanks were thrown into battle in large numbers during the early months of the war. Many were lost in combat, destroyed by enemy fire, or abandoned due to mechanical breakdowns and lack of fuel. Even though the BT tanks suffered heavy losses, they played an important role in delaying the German advance and giving time for the Soviet Union to mobilize its industry and bring newer tanks into production, such as the T-34. The experiences with the BT series had a direct influence on the design of the T-34. The Christie suspension, originally used on the BT tanks, was adapted for the T-34, giving it excellent mobility. The lessons about the need for stronger armor